A bell rings once, not a melody, but a warning. Its iron tongue groans into the cold morning, scattering pigeons from the cathedral eaves. Smoke rises from crooked chimneys, struggling through mist that clings to rooftops like a second skin. Beneath the great stone spire, a line of peasants gathers, wrapped in wool and silence. Faces half hidden beneath frostbitten cloaks. They do not speak. They do not need to. Their eyes are enough. The priest arrives late. It's always a silhouette in crimson robes, golden thread catching the dawn like fireflies. His breath does not fog the air like theirs. He carries warmth, and power, and the certainty of a man untouched by hunger. Behind him, the church doors open with a groan that sounds almost like grief. Inside, the incense is thick. It clings to the throat like ash and honey. The altar candles are already lit, flickering in the draught that never leaves the nave. The pews are cold. Stone eats the warmth from bodies, from prayers, from hope. But they kneel anyway, unsplintered. Benches, on aching knees, on memory. A boy sits near the back, clutching his mother's hand. He is too young to understand Latin, but old enough to recognize fear. His stomach growls beneath the wool tunic she sewed for him 2 winters ago. She tightens her grip. Not here, not now. Hunger is not holy. From the pulpit, the priest's voice rises, not gentle, but heavy. Each word lands like a hammer on a skull. Judgment, obedience, sin. He speaks not of salvation, but of surveillance. Of breath watched by angels, of thoughts, chained in heaven's vault. Tells them the devil does not wear horns. He wears their face when they speak too freely. No one meets his gaze. They stare instead at the crucifix above him, the wood warped, the Christ figure weathered. His face is carved in agony, but the eyes seem to look past them all, as if even he no longer listens. Outside, the fog does not lift. A raven lands on the church wall and begins to pick at the frozen carcass of a mouse. Its beak clicks softly, a sound too small to compete with the sermon, but truer somehow. A child coughs 3 times. Sharp, wet, dangerous. Heads turn. The priest pauses there. Is no cure, only prayer. No herbs, no salves. The well water has tasted of rust since Michaelmas, and those who drank from it now sleep in unmarked graves. They were not buried in consecrated ground. The church said they had not tithed, that the illness was judgment, not misfortune. In the market, a baker's widow was caught selling loaves on the feast of St. Radegond. Her stall was overturned, her hands broken. The church called it justice. The crowd called it mercy. No one called it sin. The mass continues. The priest lifts the wafer. His hands do not tremble. Hoc estenium corpus meum, he says. This is my body. But whose body, truly? The baker's, the sick child's. The kneeling mother with bruises on her back where the tax collector's rings. Pressed too hard, the wine is poured, the chalice gleams. Only the priest drinks. 1 sip for the blood of Christ. 1 more for forgetting. When the service ends, the faithful rise slowly, stiffly, as if their limbs remember chains. They exit as they entered, silent, half-bowed, half-raised. The boy lingers. His eyes trace the carvings on the wall. Saints and monsters, indistinguishable now from one another. His mother tugs his arm. They must leave. The priest watches from the shadows, eyes glittering like embers in soot. Outside, the air bites. Someone has collapsed near the steps. A young man, perhaps 19, pale as linen. He twitches. His lips are blue. No one helps. The priest crosses himself and turns away. God gives and takes, he murmurs. The boy looks back, but his mother pulls him harder. They do not bury the body. Not here. Not without silver. Along the path home, mud sucks at their shoes. A pig carcass hangs from a post, drained and waiting. Flies stir even in winter. Village smells of smoke and old meat. A dog whines under a cartwheel. The boy speaks at last. Why didn't the bell ring again? His mother doesn't answer. She watches the spire disappear into the mist behind them, and thinks of the days before the bells were bound to fear. They rang for joy, for harvest, for love. At home, the fire is out. She strikes the flint, but the stone is damp. Sparks. Sputter and die. She stares into the ashes, remembering a time when faith was warmth. Now it is control. She murmurs a prayer not for salvation, but for survival. For silence, she whispers, and for small mercies. Above the church bell stands cold and still. The rope is frayed. No one pulls it unless commanded. The boy dreams that night of the cathedral swallowing the sky, smoke rising not from chimneys, but from flesh. A bell that rings not once, but endlessly, tolling for those who breathe too loudly. He wakes before dawn. The fog has thickened. He swears he hears chanting from the hill. But the chapel is empty. The doors are barred. And somewhere deep in his chest, something new stirs. Not defiance. Not yet. But a question. A whisper of something unholy. Something dangerous. What if the bell never rang again? In the distance a crow calls. The sound carries, sharp. Alone the spire watches unmoved. But the smoke rises anyway. The bread lies untouched. A single barley loaf, pale and cracked, rests on the altar beneath flickering candlelight. It is not food now. It is transformation. Mystery. Threat they call it. The host. The body of Christ. But to the starving man who carved it from moldy grain, kneaded it with trembling hands, and offered it to the priest, it is simply bread, and still it is taken from him. The altar cloth is white, but stained at the corners, sweat, wax, old, blood perhaps. The priest's hands hover above the loaf as if afraid to touch it. His voice, draped in Latin, declares it sacred. Hoc est corpus. The farmer who grew the barley stands in the back pew, hat twisted between cracked fingers. His son is sick. The well water has not cleared. The herbs haven't helped. Came here with the bread as an offering, not a bribe, a plea. For prayer, for mercy. But the priest accepts the loaf, blesses it, and places it among the others. And words for thee. Boy, no glance at the father. The man lowers his head. He has no coin. Outside, a mother holds her weeping child in the square. His ankle is twisted from a fall, bone jutting like a broken fence post. She begs for help. The sacristan emerges from the church, robes fluttering, mouth full of rehearsed pity. God gives pain to the proud, he says. To confess, and perhaps, your son will be healed. But the mother cannot afford confession. It's cost 3 copper pieces, 2, if you've sinned before. She curses under her breath. The sacristan hears. She is struck, once across the face. The child wails louder. Somewhere behind them, a chicken clucks nervously in the mud. Life continues. Always. The priest returns to his chambers. Inside, the fire is warm. The tapestry on the wall shows St. Bartholomew flayed, eyes lifted in holy rapture. The priest stares at it while sipping wine. His robe's hem is embroidered. With gold, a gift from a noble widow who wished to forget what she did to her servants last spring. On his table, scrolls, letters, a ledger. Names marked with ticks, some with crosses. A list of who is tithed and who is not, who is confessed and who pretends. Who will be buried in holy ground and who will rot just beyond it. Outside, the village is gray. Crows peck at a broken cart of turnips. A dog limps toward the chapel and stops, as if it too knows the doors will not open for the hungry. Inside the baker's cottage, a woman hides 2 loaves beneath her cloak. Her husband was caught working on St. Dunstan's feast day. Its punishment, no communion for a season, no entrance into church, no priestly blessing on their home. They are marked now, but their children must eat. So she has baked the loaves. In secret, she breaks one carefully, quietly, over a bowl of broth that tastes more of stones than meat. She remembers. Faintly the words of Christ, "Take, eat, this is my body." But what body is this, and who gave it? A traveler passes through the village that night, a tinker with news from the next valley, speaks in whispers, over cider traded for sharpening a blade. They burned a healer there, he says. Woman who offered bread and herbs to the sick, said it was charity, said it was love, died. But the bishop declared it pride. Did she confess? Someone asks. The tinker shrugs. She said she didn't need to. A hush falls. No one speaks such things aloud. Not here. Not where the walls have ears, stone ones carved with saints and twisted smiles. The next morning, the church is full again. A festival mass. Saint Bartholomew again, martyr for obedience. The candles are lit, the bells rung, the host lifted high. The priest chants, his voice echoing off stone and suffering. The congregation kneels, hungry and afraid. They open their mouths like birds in a nest, waiting for crumbs of divinity. And yet, one woman, the baker's wife, does not open hers. She watches the priest, watches the wafer, watches the wine, thick and dark as clotted blood. Her lips remain closed. The priest sees her. A pause, a flicker. Sent, he moves on. Later, she is visited. Not by the priest, but by the sacristan. Two men in dark robes. You denied the body of Christ, they say. I did not deny, she replies. I have already eaten. Her meaning is unclear, or perhaps too clear. They search her cottage. Find the second loaf, untouched, unblessed. Is taken, crumbled, she is fined more than she can pay. Her husband will do the labor. Her son will not be allowed to serve at the altar again. And yet, that night, she needs another loaf. Her hands shake, but she sings softly, not a hymn, not Latin. Just a tune her mother once hummed while baking under the weight of the same fear in her oven. The crust cracks gently. Bread rises. Slow, golden, defiant, she feeds her children. She eats last, and outside, the cathedral looms. Its tower is a finger pointed at heaven. But heaven does not answer. Not tonight. Tonight only the bread speaks. Its warmth fills the silence. Scent fills the cracks. And the church, for all its scrolls and chains and candles, cannot taste it. Not this bread. Not this body. Not anymore. The ink runs like blood. Not spilled, but pressed. Squeezed from the veins of a raven, stirred with ash and wine. Dragged across stretched vellum by a trembling hand. The monk does not speak. His lips are cracked from fasting, his fingers blistered by candlelight. But still, he writes, each stroke is a vow, each letter a warning. The words are not his own, in a chamber where the sun never quite reaches, beneath beams blackened by decades of soot and whispered prayers. Brother Thorn copies psalms onto a sheet of calfskin that smells faintly of death. And lime? The script is beautiful, sharp, controlled, forged like a weapon. Dominus, illuminatio, me. The Lord is my light, but the room is dark. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax, mildew, and sweat. Pages flutter on the floor like wounded birds. A rat scurries across a fallen quill. No one afflish. It's the scriptorium, the church's brain, its memory, its mouth. And memory here is not freedom, it is control. Outside the children. Gather for morning lesson. A bell rings. Not soft, not sweet. Clang, cold and cruel. Like the edge of a shovel on stone, they sit on wooden benches too narrow for comfort, their backs straight, their eyes lowered. Their instructor, Father Henrik, walks the aisle with a willow switch. His boots echo between stone walls. His breath smells of salted meat and rot. He teaches not language, but obedience. Not how to read, but what not to ask. One girl, Ellen, dares to speak. What is thunder? She asks, eyes wide, voice barely above the sound of the wind. A pause. Henrik's. Switch whistles once, twice. A red line blossoms on her arm like a ribbon of flame. Thunder is the anger of God, he hisses, and questions are the gate to hell. The other children stare straight ahead. A crow calls from the windowsill. No one dares look. Later, Ellen's hair is cut short. A braid burned in the stove. Pride, they said, must be purged by fire. She weeps in silence. That night she dreams of lightning licking the edges of a cathedral, setting the steeple alight. She tells no one. Dreams are not permitted. In the abbey, the monks debate the placement of a single comma. Misplaced mark can shift doctrine, twist salvation into heresy. They argue with tight voices, tight fists. Brother Thorn says nothing. He simply writes. His back aches, his joints crack. He thinks of the forest he once saw beyond the monastery wall, a flash of green and freedom before he took the cloth. Before they told him that his thoughts were dangerous, he had once written a poem. Just once. It was about the wind, about how it touched everything but could not be held. He showed it to the abbot. The poem was burned. The whip was brought. His ribs still ache in winter. Now he writes only what he is told. The church owns the word. The church is the word. Books are chained in the library. Iron links snaking through the pages like a reminder. Knowledge is not for the many. Only the chosen may read. The rest must kneel. The priest says the soul must be kept in darkness so it can better see the light. But what if the soul grows blind instead? The villagers do not read, they repeat. Words taught by rote, syllables like coins passed from hand to hand, losing meaning with each exchange. A mother teaches her daughter the pater noster not from faith, but from fear. If the girl forgets a line, the priest may say the devil lives in her tongue, and then the trials begin in the marketplace. A man is lashed for speaking aloud a verse from an old ballad, one that mentioned pagan gods and rivers, he claimed. It was only a song. The priest said it was treason. The whip cracked across his back 16 times. The blood soaked through his linen. The crowd watched, silent. And in the monastery, Brother Thorn wrote the next day's psalm. Blessed are the meek, a lie, he thinks. But he writes it anyway. He does not dare otherwise. In the evening, the school children are taught to copy Latin letters onto tablets coated in wax. Their styluses tremble. One boy writes too slowly. The switch is used again. He limps home in silence. His father kisses his temple and whispers, "Hide your thoughts." He does not ask what it means. In the convent, Sister Ellen, once Ellen, before the cut, now scrubs the stone floors in silence. Her eyes no longer search the sky. She recites her lessons perfectly. But at night, when the candles burn low, she draws birds into the dust with her finger. They vanish with the first footfall. The books in the church grow in number, but not in meaning. Pages of law, lists of sin, instructions for the management of the soul. Brother Thorn writes a sermon on pride. The word appears 12 times.
Ice.
He is told to add a 13th. The ink on his hands never fades. He has forgotten the poem. Forgotten the forest. But when he looks at the vellum, he sometimes wonders if the calf dreamed before it was killed. If it ran, if it saw sky, and if its skin remembers, he dips the quill again. Writes another warning, another chain. A drop of ink falls, not on purpose, not by mistake, just enough to blur one word. He stares at it. He leaves it in the chapel. That night, the priest lifts the Bible, recites a verse, misses the change. The congregation kneels, obeys, breathes. But somewhere in the shadows, the blurred word waits. A single drop of silence. A seed. The basin is frozen. A skin of ice rims the font in the chapel's northern wing, where sunlight never enters and prayers leave no warmth. The frost traces delicate patterns along the stone lip like veins, or cracks in ancient glass. They gather anyway. Wrapped in layers of wool and whispered fear, the villagers press forward for the morning sacrament. The baby is only 4 days. Old, but his mother was told to hurry. The air carries sickness this winter. And the church has made it clear, the unbaptized do not go to heaven, not even children, especially not children. The priest wears gloves. Today, not out of reverence, but protection. His hands tremble beneath the fabric. The water was drawn before sunrise, cold and metallic from the iron well near the gallows. Smells faintly of rust and forgotten chains. The baby cries as they bring him forward, but not loudly. His voice is small, cracked at the edges. He hasn't fed since the night before. The mother stands barefoot on the stone floor. Her boots were taken, traded to pay for this ritual. Her toes are purple. Her eyes are distant. She doesn't look at the font. The priest says the words, Latin again. It's always Latin, as if God has no ears for the tongue of the poor. He dips his fingers, hesitates, then lets the icy water fall onto the baby's scalp. The child gasps. A breath, a cry, and then nothing. For a moment, the chapel is silent. It's a kind of silence that feels like waiting. Then the baby exhales, weak and wet, and the mother weeps not from joy, but from relief. He still breathes. He still counts. But something inside her has shattered. The baptism is done. The boy has a name now, though not one of her choosing. Matthias, chosen by the priest. Saint's name, he says. The church must approve all names. Now, old names, ancestral, pagan, foreign are scrubbed away. The name she whispered during labor, Jonan. Her grandfather's name will never be written. A clerk copies Matthias into the registry with a quill that smells of vinegar. His face is blank. The ledger creaks as it closes. Outside, the bells toll once. Not for celebration, it's for compliance. In the village square, a girl sits on a bench beside the well. Her hair is braided tight, her face pink from wind. She sings a lullaby under her breath, one passed down by her grandmother. The priest hears her and approaches. That song is not sanctioned, he says. It is only for my brother, she replies. There is only one cradle, he says, and it is God's. She nods, but the melody lingers in her mouth like honey. She hums it again that night, under the covers, where no one can hear but the rats and the saints. Back in the chapel, the baptism basin is drained. The water is poured outside, where it freezes in streaks along the stone path. Crows gather too, peck at the shimmering puddles. The basin is scrubbed with vinegar. The priest insists. You must wash away what was before, he says. The sacristan nods. His hands are raw from the cold. He once baptized a stillborn, just in case. No one spoke of it afterward. In the cottage near the edge of town, the newly baptized baby sleeps in a cradle stuffed with straw. The mother sits beside him, staring at the fire. It flickers low, more smoke than flame. She touches his head where the water landed. It is still cold. She wonders if the ritual meant anything, if heaven is truly so. It's fragile. If names can build ladders to eternity, the wind howls outside, rattling the shutters. The cradle creaks with every gust, as if the child is already on a boat, drifting, somewhere unreachable. That night, another child is born, alone in the woods beyond the chapel. A healer delivers him, a woman the church does not name, does not bless, but who knows the rhythm of blood and breath better than any priest. The mother holds her child to her chest. No candles, no Latin, only warmth and the sound of her heartbeat. She whispers a name, soft name from the old tongue. They will not tell the church. Not yet, not until it's too late to erase him. The next morning, frost etches the windows of the chapel like scripture. The priest shivers in his robes. He asks, "For a fire to be lit in the sacristy?" "No," says the deacon. "The wood is needed for funerals." 3 more bodies have been found by the river, unblessed, unnamed. One was just a girl, 12 years old. She hadn't been baptized. Her parents missed the window. The priest refuses to bury her on sacred ground. We cannot risk the others. He says it is for their protection. They dig her grave at the edge of the forest. No cross, no psalm, just earth and the wind. And her mother's scream echoing through the trees like a curse. That evening, the font is filled again. Another baby, another name, another soul, secured in the books. They say the church guards the gate to heaven. What? Only through its rites can one be remembered. But the forest remembers. The wind remembers. The mother who whispers her child's name to the stars remembers. And sometimes, when the fog hangs low and the bell fails to ring, one might wonder whose. Water was cleaner? The iron in the basin? Or the warmth in a mother's breath? The stone floor beneath the confessional is worn smooth by centuries of knees, some bruised by penance. Others buckling beneath the weight of guilt that was never truly theirs. It is twilight now, and the church glows from within like a beast. With fire in its belly, candlelight flickers against the carved lattice of the confessional screen. On one side, the penitent, trembling, whispering secrets like poison into the dark. On the other, the priest, faceless, voiceless at first, listening, always listening. They come at dusk. The baker who struck his wife, the boy who stared too long at the crucifix and felt nothing, the widow who dreams of her husband's brother, and they leave lighter but only in soul. In the world beyond the nave, the priest remembers every word. So does the church. Confession, once a sacred balm, is now a ledger. Sins recorded not in ink, but in leverage. Who stole from the grain sacks? Who doubts the Pope? Who touched? Who lusted? Who dared speak Latin aloud without blessing? The confessional is not sanctuary, is surveillance disguised as mercy. Some do not understand this. They confess with eyes closed, fingers twisted around rosary beads, begging not for forgiveness, but for release from illness, from hunger, from the trembling at night, as they pray the priest will absolve them. But absolution now comes with a cost. One must tithe. One must serve. One must remember who holds the keys to heaven. Outside, the parish sits under a net of silence. Doors are thinner now, walls filled with ears. A word spoken in warmth by the hearth is repeated in cold stone hours later. Children are punished for their father's doubts. A woman's sin becomes her sister's penance. Families learn to speak. In glances, to pray with caution. Even the birds seem to sing more softly. The priest, once a man of cloth and scripture, becomes something else, an informant, a judge cloaked in holy shadow. He walks through the village with serenity in his gait, but behind his gaze lies a map of every soul's weak place. He knows who fears hell the most, and who might be led there with just a nudge in time. The people begin to confess not their sins, but their neighbors. A survival tactic, a currency. The shepherd says the farmer skipped mass. The miller says the midwife used herbs not blessed. And so, the church grows fat on betrayal, disguised as righteousness. One night, a wind howls through the bell tower, and a girl kneels in the box, weeping. She says she dreamt of fire in the shape of wings. She says she saw a saint rise from the grave, but with eyes black as crows. She says she no longer knows if her voice is her own. The priest listens, then gently asks who else was in the dream. She hesitates. She speaks her brother's name. The next morning he is gone, and so the confessional becomes not a place of healing, but of harvesting. The church reaps fear, it plows suspicion, it waters with guilt. And the croppet yields as obedience thick, choking eternal. In the nave, incense curls like smoke from a dying fire. The candles burn low, wax weeping down their sides. A man kneels, lips moving soundlessly. Behind the lattice, another listens. Somewhere beyond them both, a quill scratches in the rectory's ledgers. Another soul documented, another breath. Owned outside, the moon rises over rooftops, stitched with shadow. In a nearby home, a mother tells her children not to speak in their sleep. She teaches them prayers with no heresy, no doubt, no extra syllables. She teaches them to confess early and often, but the wind remembers what the people forget. It passes, through trees and thatch and stone, whispering the names the church is buried, and as the bell rings, midnight deep, slow, final, the echo carries further than it should. The next chapter begins in silence. In a village where even dreams are not safe, dawn bleeds gray over the village, but no roosters crow. The chickens are silent. The dogs do not bark. There is a weight to the morning as if something has been taken from the air itself. Doors creak open one by one, and wary eyes scan the streets. There is no blood, no signs of fire or storm, and yet 5 homes stand empty. Their hearths are cold, their beds undisturbed. Bowls sit on tables, filled with untouched porridge. The people have vanished, parents, children, even an infant with swaddles still warm. No footprints, no struggle. Just the echo of absence, sharp and absolute. Whispers ripple through the town like fever, demons, witches, God's wrath. But only the priest knows the truth. He stands beneath the crucifix, eyes closed, lips moving in a prayer no one hears. Behind him, locked in the sacristy, is a book bound in dark leather, inked in Latin, with margins filled by a different hand. A list, names, confessions, judgments. The missing were not sinners, not really, but they had been named. Some accused of doubt, others of silence. One of dreaming too much. It didn't matter. If it was true, the accusation was enough. The church called it cleansing, a quiet removal to protect the faithful. No gallows, no fire, just absence. It was cleaner that way. More merciful, they said. But the people begin to understand now. Mercy does not come freely. It is bartered, and betrayal is the currency. A boy runs into the square, breathless. He says he found footprints bare leading into the forest. One set, then another, then more. Some small as a child's, some deep as a man, dragging weight behind him. They vanish at the old well, the one the church sealed decades ago. The villagers gather, but no one speaks. No one moves. Closer. They've heard the stories. The priest arrives last, flanked by 2 acolytes in heavy robes. He does not approach the well, simply recites scripture aloud, voice unwavering. But even as he speaks of salvation and divine order, a woman in the crowd begins to cry, then another, because they know now, this is not salvation, it is subtraction, and no one knows whose turn comes next. At sunset, a new rule is posted on the chapel doors. All dreams must be reported. All suspicions, no matter how small, are to be confessed by week's end. A basket is left beneath the rule, lined in velvet. Anonymous slips encouraged. That night, the wind picks up. Wakens screaming, but remembers nothing. A farmer finds ash on his windowsill, and the midwife swears she saw someone standing in her doorway all still, wearing the robes of the church but with no face beneath the hood. Inside the confessional, the priest whispers to no one. His voice is low, urgent, as if seeking forgiveness not from God but from something older. Watching from the dark corners of the nave, the vanished do not return, but the fear they left behind grows roots. The bell does not ring anymore. Its rope was cut 3 nights ago, though no one speaks of it. The villagers pretend not to notice the silence where once there was rhythm matines, sexed vespers like a heartbeat of heaven. Now the chapel stands mute, and the sky feels heavier for it. Only the crows gather on the tower now, black wings twitching, beaks facing east. Beneath the tower, in the crypt where old priests are buried in salt and lime, smoke has begun to seep through the stonework. At first they thought it was rot or damp, or the echo of incense burned too long. But it does not smell like incense. It smells like parchment and bone, like something that should never have been burned. The priest tells them it is nothing. He tells them to pray, but his eyes no longer meet theirs. He's seen the cracks in the walls widen. He's heard the chants in his dreams, phrases not in Latin, it's not in any tongue known to man, but carved into the margins of the old texts, hidden deep within the vestry. One night, the baker's boy dares to follow the smoke. He descends beneath the altar, where saints once lay in silent praise. What he finds is no miracle. The crypt stones are scorched, blackened in the shapes of hands, dozens, maybe hundreds, clawing upward. Candles burn, but no one lit them. In the far corner, a figure kneels over a book that writes itself. Ink moves without quill. And as the boy stares, frozen, the figure turns, and it wears the priest's face, but with eyes stitched shut by mourning. The boy cannot speak. Points, trembles, weeps. He dies 2 days later with soot on his tongue. The church declares it a seizure. The body is burned without blessing, and still the bell does not ring. But those who rise before dawn say they hear it now in their heads. It's faint, irregular, as if underwater. A toll that makes teeth ache. Mothers press cloth to their babies. Ears. Dogs howl and claw at doors. The forge cracks. The bread won't rise. A woman walks into the river and doesn't return. A new edict is nailed to the chapel door. To question is to kindle heresy. Let not your curiosity become your judgment. That night the tower's crows fly in frantic circles. A shadow passes across the moon, and in the chapel below, the priest dreams of fire. Not hellfire, but smoke without flame. Holy smoke. The kind that erases memory. The village does not sleep, but no one dares to pray. They arrived in silence, cloaked in robes, the color of dried blood, their faces veiled beneath linen, stained with ash and salt. No one saw them enter the valley. No hoofprints.
Oh.
No wheel tracks. Just one morning, they were there 12 figures kneeling in the scorched fields beyond the chapel, hands folded, heads bowed toward a sunless sky. The people watched from behind. Shuttered windows, breath caught between awe and dread. Children were pulled indoors. Dogs whined and would not cross the threshold. Even the birds refused to fly overhead. They came from Vallis Noctum, the Valley of Night, an order older than the abbey itself. Whispers said they were once scribes who copied forbidden gospels until the ink turned to blood. Others said they'd buried their tongues in a ritual of silence and could hear the thoughts of the dead. But what the villagers saw was stranger still. The ash monks never moved, never ate, never drank.
Out.
Yet with each passing dusk, their number grew. 12 became 13, then 16. And no one saw the new ones arrive. The priest would not speak of them. When asked, he simply looked to the tower where the rope had once hung and whispered, "This is beyond bells." On the 5th night, the wind changed.
Ow.
It came down from the high forests with the sound of whispering leaves, but the trees stood still. The villagers heard names in the wind, their own names, the names of those long dead. And in the fields, the ash monks raised their heads for the first time. Their faces were gone, not burned, not disfigured, gone. Where eyes should have been there, where hollow sockets filled with dust, where mouths should have been, only a faint red line, stitched with wire. And yet they chanted a sound like breath moving through broken reeds, rising in waves that pulled the very soil upward. That night, the village priest disappeared. Some say he went willingly, walked barefoot to the monks, and vanished among them. Others say he was dragged beneath the chapel floor by hands made of smoke. In his chambers only one thing remained, a single scrap of vellum pinned to the altar with a bone. The veil is not rent by sin, but by memory. Then the dreams began. The villagers dreamed not of their own lives, but of lives they had never lived. Of cities burned by fire that fell from starless skies. Of altars built in caverns, lit by blood and flame. Of children born with silver eyes, who spoke truths no adult could bear. They woke with dirt beneath their fingernails and tasted salt on their tongues. One by one, began to lose time. A girl disappeared for 7 days, only to return with her hair turned white and speaking in riddles. A blacksmith found himself at the edge of the valley, hands blistered, unsure how he got there. A mother opened her cupboard and found it full of feathers on the 7th day. The chapel bell rang, though the rope was long gone. It rang once, low and long and hollow, like the breath of a dying world, and the ash monks began to walk, not toward the chapel, not toward the village, but inward, into the soil, as if the land were folding to receive them. One by one, they sank robes, disappearing into the ground until the fields were bare. No footsteps, no graves. Only the faint scent of burnt paper and the sound of distant bells. Underwater, endless, and slow. The villagers did not speak of it again, but something had changed. The wind would not leave. The animals refused to breed. Children were born with birthmarks in the shape of keys, and the chapel doors, once sealed by the priest, now creaked open every night. Though no one dared look inside, there are no more monks. But the valley remembers, and beneath the floorboards, the earth continues to whisper. It began with a child's scream at dawn, shrill, sudden, and sliced short as if swallowed by the mist. By the time the villagers reached the hill behind the chapel, the girl was already kneeling in the frostbitten grass, her face pale, her lips cracked from silence. In her hands, a book. It had not been there the day before. No one in the village recognized its binding leather, so dark it seemed to drink the morning light, in clasps of bone instead of brass. No title, no author, no seal. Just a single rune burned into the front cover, a circle broken by 3 jagged lines, like claws or cracks in a mirror. The girl, Ellen, daughter of the carpenter, was 7. She hadn't spoken since her mother vanished during the famine 2 winters ago. But now her eyes glowed with fever, and when she opened the book her voice returned, not in words she had ever known, but in a tongue older than Latin, older than Scripture. She read aloud, and the world changed. The wind stopped. Birdsong ceased. A crow dropped dead in flight and landed at the villager's feet with its beak split open, as if from screaming. As she turned each page, the ink rearranged itself. Sentences bled across the parchment. Drawings moved like reflections in dark water. And when someone tried to snatch the book from her hands, they fell backward. Screaming, their eyes burned a pale gray. Blind for 3 days, Ellen did not eat. She did not sleep. She read through firelight and frost, through storm and sunless dusk. The book grew heavier with every chapter, though no one could see any change in its size. And slowly, things began to vanish. Not people, not yet, but memories. A widow forgot her husband's name. A midwife couldn't recall the face of her own son. By week's end, a quarter of the village could no longer speak of the war, the harvest, or the old songs once sung before childbirth. Each forgotten thing reappeared, not in life, but in ink. In Ellen's book, a drawing of a soldier missing a nose, etched in crimson. A recipe for barley bread scrawled in a corner, upside down. A lullaby written backward in gold. The book was taking what the village knew, and in return, it gave nothing. By the 10th day, Ellen's eyes were black. It's not bruised, black like oil lamps blown out in a cave. When she finally stood, the wind returned, so did the birds, but their feathers were now gray. Their songs were wrong. Ellen walked to the chapel steps, where the priest once gave sermons. She opened the final page and laughed. It was a sound no one could bear. It cracked the windows of the chapel and sent 3 men to their knees. An old woman's heart gave out. The sky turned ochre for one brief moment. Then the book slammed shut, and Ellen vanished, gone. No footprints, no smoke, no, just frost where she stood, and the faintest echo of pages turning far below the earth. The book remained, chained. Now to the chapel altar, its bone clasps locked tight. No one dared touch it. But each week, a new line appears, in languages no one knows. It's always the same closing mark. The rune of memory unmade. The villagers leave offerings beside it, feathers, its broken quills, bits of parchment. Not out of worship, but fear, because every child born since Ellen disappeared carries a birthmark on their palm. A circle split by 3 jagged lines, and sometimes in sleep. They speak in tongues no cradle song could teach. They buried the first man with garlic in his mouth and nettles around his wrists, not out of superstition, but desperation. He had not died like the others. There had been no coughing, no fever, no blood, just silence. One moment he was speaking to the blacksmith at dusk, and the next he collapsed mid-sentence, eyes wide, lips parted, no breath, no wound, no mark. 2 more had fallen. A widow in her sleep, a child chasing crows, they seemed. Emptied, not sick, not poisoned, simply gone like a bell whose sound had been stolen. The physician from the abbey arrived on horseback, robes stiff with frost and hands trembling as he examined the bodies. He opened veins, pressed fingers to pulses, whispered Latin prayers. Then he burned sage and wept. "This is no disease," he whispered. "This is something else." He was right. The deaths did not spread through touch, nor breath, nor blood. They followed stories. Whoever heard the tale of the first death would, within days, forget a single word, then a name, then their own face in the mirror. When the forgetting reached the heart, the body simply stopped. It was not the illness that killed, it was knowing. They called it the whisper plague, not because it was quiet, but because it traveled by whispers. A merchant told his wife of a man who died standing up. she told the butcher. The butcher told his son. All three were buried before the week's end. The village imposed a silence. No tales. No names. No mention of the dead. Children were gagged at supper. Priests gave sermons and gestures. The bell tower was wrapped in wool to mute its toll. And still, the forgetting grew. They tried burning the bodies, then burying them at crossroads, even threw one into the cursed well outside the village wall, where an old knight once drowned his sins. Nothing worked, until one night, a deaf girl named Leva, who had never spoken a word nor heard a tale, stepped into the chapel with a knife and a pot of ink. She carved runes into the chapel floor, not with steel, but with blood. She drew a circle, then a line, then a tear, then an eye, and then she screamed. The sound came not from her throat, but from the air itself. A scream that shattered every window, splintered the altar, and cracked open the ground beneath the chapel. From the pit rose a wind that smelled of old parchment and candle ash. The wind carried whispers, but this time they fled, outward into the hills, into the trees, into the bones of birds and the hollows of wolves. The plague, if that's what it was left. And so did Leva. They never found her body, only the knife, and a line of ink trailing toward the woods. Since that day, no one in the village speaks of death. They bury their dead without names, without ceremony. They let grief rot in silence. But every spring, wild nettles grow on the chapel floor in the shape of a girl's scream, and sometimes, if you press your ear to the earth, you don't hear her voice. You hear your own name, spoken by a tongue that doesn't belong to you.